Wow. I can't believe I finally finished this video. It's taken me a week to go through the opening ceremonies that I promised to give to you guys. And I had a chance to listen to some other decoders. Some of you sent me videos of them with the gematria. And I think, they're getting closer. I found one gematria guy that was actually decoding the number 201 with this Olympics. They also noticed that the word Mary was used a lot for the Virgin Mary. And they thought that some of the symbolism was for Uranus for the age of Aquarius. Okay, but it goes so much deeper than all that. It's mind boggling that I kind of knew the Olympics were going to be ceremony to the French Revolution. I had written that all in my book, and didn't disappoint me, put it that way. Everything that I had believed that it would be exposed there was, but it's a little bit hidden. So I had to do some digging and lots of research. I have over 100 slides to show you for pictures, just because it's easier to see pictures. And we're going to get into the mythology of Dionysus. We're going to see that they showed us the three paths, whether or not, that is how people see that, but that's the way I always believe because that's written in the Bible. There's three paths. There's the people that fight, there's the people that pass away, and then there's the people that ascend. Okay, that's all in the Bible. I'm not going to get into all that part of it, but I'm going to show you the three paths and the animals they use to represent those three paths. I found that out. So I learned a lot from these opening ceremonies. I learned who they're worshiping, and for sure they're worshiping Dionysus. And even though the alchemic symbol here, the number 24 with Snoop Dogg, because he's showing up at the Olympics everywhere. And I'm sure that has some importance because of his name being Dog, which is backwards for God. Okay, so the number 24, like this, is the alchemic symbol for Jupiter. Jupiter's symbol can be the bull, and some people are starting to think that the bull is his symbol only, but it's not. It's also Dionysus, and I'm going to get into that, and I'll show you how they completely worship Dionysus at these Olympics and why they're doing that. Okay, so let's get into it. So I like this picture with the flame going through the Arc de Triomphe because I actually noticed this is part of my book, this path, because there's also other arches that they've built along this path. But this path, if you go on Google Earth, will direct you right to Montreal. Okay, so Montreal is a big part of this. Obviously, it's the oldest French, town, well, besides Quebec City in Quebec. But Montreal, if you read my book, you'll understand why that city represents freedom more so than Quebec City. Okay, so there's this whole history of what's happened at this arc. Napoleon went through here, the Nazis went through here. It's like it's always going through this Arc of Triumph because this goes back to Julius Caesar's Arc de Triomphe. Okay, so there's symbolism there. I just wanted to show you how I've written all this stuff in my book. Previously, King St. Louis, there's the Ile de St. Louis on the Seine River, and they didn't show a lot of symbolism to the king, except that they named, I think, Snoop Dogg the king of the Olympics. Okay, so maybe he's referencing St. Louis. I don't know. They didn't show a lot of symbolism with St. Louis, but this is all very important to America with St. Louis City because it's named after King St. Louis. And these are basically an order. There's an order called St. Louis Order, and it's all to do with freedom. Okay, so also the Marquis de Lafayette, the USA Trail, that is all being maintained now, and signs are putting up from where he went. And in my book, I show you exactly where he went, but there was a reference to him in the opening ceremonies as well. And of course to Marie Antoinette and everything with her head being chopped off at the opening ceremony. So I just wanted you to know that this is all history being presented to you so that you deal with the emotions of those events and try to kind of figure them out, you know, what propaganda was being used in the French Revolution. I do think it was a psyop by the British Empire. Okay, so that's all in my book too. So if you really want to understand this ceremony even more, I would suggest you getting my book. It's $10 and it's an ebook and you can print it out if you like. Okay, so let's get going here. So somebody had mentioned in my last video, I thought this was really interesting because I was discussing the September 11th date with the Quebec City bridge falling. And that's on the chakra ley line that runs from New York City. And they seem to like the number 9/11. So this was really interesting. This lady had mentioned August 29th date of when the bridge fell as well, also adds up to in the Julian calendar to September 11th as well. So it's a 13-day to convert from Julian to Gregorian calendar. So she says, interesting as well, August 29th is the Christian commemoration date of the beheading of John the Baptist. This is very, very important. And if you go back and look at the index in my book, John the Baptist is a big part of this. Okay, so John the Baptist is the oil that runs up your back, and the Templars and the Freemasons worship him. So this is why August 29th is important with that bridge falling for the engineer ring, which I mentioned in my last video, and why they've built this big engineering ring in Place Ville Marie in Montreal for the building of the New Jerusalem. Okay, so, oh, this was another, this is for the end of the ceremony. Sorry, I didn't want to put that in there, but that's Tom Cruise is going to be at the closing ceremonies. He's going to be there and showing up. I wanted to put that at the end, but somehow I got there. This is the 33rd Olympiad. Okay, so that is why it's so important, okay, because of the number 33 being a Freemason number. And you have to understand the Freemasons were kind of psyoped into Christians believing they were a secret society doing harm to society. There was a murder that happened, it got blamed on them. You can go look at the history of all that. But really, the Masons worship all religions, okay? And they even worship pre-Christianity, okay? So that's what this Olympics was about. It's about pre-Christianity. It's not about insulting Christianity. It's about the religions before Christianity even existed, okay? So that is something you have to understand. So if you want to see it as satanic, that is Christianity. So you're bringing in your beliefs of Christianity into an era where Christianity didn't even exist. Okay, so it's not logical in my mind to think like that. And they're talking about the journey through time, both past and future. Yes, because all time is at one time, because your emotions are attached to past events and future events. Basically, how you perceive reality and how you judge it is all based on your past lives, okay? And how you perceive where it's going is all based on your past experiences. So you have to understand that you have to have an open heart and be willing to listen to all sides of the stories, okay? And this is what I'm trying to do with these videos, to help people get into a place of inner peace, into a bliss state, because you need that to be able to ascend. And the more of us that ascend and work with the ley lines to build the energy up on this planet, we will be able to pull everybody up from the energies, okay? So we're kind of locked in a low frequency because it's, in a sense, a hell realm. And you have to be able to bring this emotional field that is in the ley lines through the water systems underneath the ley lines and through the crystal caves that the ley lines run through. There, it's like a battery, right? And you can start to see that they're trying to get us away from the water and up into the air because of the cell phones. That has a crystal in the cell phone, but it's in the airwaves. It's not attached to the memory of the planet. Okay, so this is, it gets very complex, but I just want you to understand you have the chance right now to help bring the energy up. depending if you can control your emotional state, right? And your thoughts and to keep them positive. So let's try to keep positive and not look at everything as evil, because everything is evil and everything's positive at the same time. Okay. So they did, this is from this decoder that is in gematria, and he had noticed, that, this was all to do with Marie Antoinette, this whole iron, what's it called? Oh, what's it called? When the music is, oh, it's gone right out of my head right now. Iron, it's like Iron Maiden, it's heavy metal music. Sorry, heavy metal music. Okay. They did a whole ceremony to her, and they had her, a whole bunch of hers in the windows, and this is the heavy metal band. Okay. This is part of the ceremony, and Marie Antoinette goes in all these windows, and they're showing, this is all to do with the headless figures depicting Marie Antoinette, because she had her head chopped off after the US became free of the British Empire. I believe the British Empire did a psyop in France to get the people to turn against the king and the queen, because they helped fund the War of Independence in the United States. Okay, so then they got her to look like she didn't care about the people. Some saying about, she says, oh, I don't care if they're poor, let them go eat cake. And that got everybody angry. And then there was all these different political parties fighting. Some of them were Scottish that were in France, and that group ended up kind of saying, let's go get the king and queen and let's, chop their heads off. Okay, their heads should never have been chopped off. They were helping the United States become free. And then in return, the British turned on France and, dethroned them. Okay, so it's very complex. That's what I believe. Nobody's ever said that. That's just my belief from understanding history and what went down, and understanding Marie Antoinette and what she represented. And I'll go into some of the stuff, some songs that she was singing, and how she was hoping that the people would wake up. Okay, so yeah, this is the heavy metal band, and this is the song that they sang. I don't know how to pronounce this. Gojira performed A Ka Ira at the Paris Olympic ceremony. It's the first heavy metal band to ever perform there at an Olympic ceremony. They're very coded heavy metal songs. Okay, so this Sai Ka Ira, it's French to be, it'll be fine. Okay, everything's going to work out. It was an emblematic song of the French Revolution, first heard in May 1790. So we're talking like 13 years after, 14 years after the founding of the United States, right? So there's all this turmoil going in France because they helped the Americans. Now, this is really interesting. So they said this was part of the propaganda that was published in the British papers. The demons in the sky sing Sa Ira as a blade of the guillotine severs the head of Louis the 16th in the British print, published just 4 days after the king's execution on January 21st, 1793. So yeah, and then they're saying here, Queen Marie Antoinette herself is said to have often played the music on her harpsichord. And the title and theme of the refrain was inspired by Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin and the Marquis de Lafayette were very close friends with Marie Antoinette and King Louis the 16th. Okay, so I don't believe they were bad people, the king and the queen. Okay, and I don't believe that they wanted to let their citizens starve. Okay, I think it's all a psyop. How they use the news now, it's kind of the same thing. So here it was used actually in a British propaganda illustration. So they do these cartoon illustrations to change people's views, right? And they have the Templar crosses here with the priest. They're stepping on their heads. Okay, this is kind of symbolic to St. John the Baptist, because he gets his head severed. Okay, St. John the Baptist's heads get severed off. Okay, basically your oil can't ascend you. Your head's chopped off. Interesting enough, I had a shaman come to my property And she looks at me and she goes, "You've had your head chopped off." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, in a past life, you've had your head chopped off." And I was not shocked because I have scoliosis in my neck. So, I was kind of like, I wonder if I experienced this or, at least, was part of this French Revolution. I was like, that's where they chop people's heads off, was in France. And they talk about, it was written on the musician's hat up here. It's on his hat, the saying, "Sa ira, all will be fine." Yeah, after they punished them for helping the Americans, right? So the lyrics, very interesting. All will be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. The people on this day repeat over and over, all will be fine. Okay. In spite of the mutineers, everything shall succeed. Okay. Our enemies confronted, stay petrified, and we shall sing Alleluia. Okay. This is why Leonard Cohen's song is very important, the Hallelujah. It'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. When Beaulieu spoke of the clergy like a prophet, he predicted this. By singing my little song with pleasure, people shall say, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. You got to remember, Marie Antoinette used to sing this song. According to the precepts of the gospel of the lawmakers, everything shall be accomplished. He who exalts himself shall be humbled. He who is humbled shall be exalted. The true catechism of shall instruct us, and the awful fanaticism shall be snuffed out. Be obedient to law. Every Frenchman shall train. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Excuse my uh, pronunciation. So here they're talking about the aristocrats say mea culpa. And that is a saying regarding, I think it was also to be fine in a way. Okay, so through justice, the nation shall have it. Thanks to the careful Lafayette. Okay, this is Marie Antoinette singing this song. Think about her singing this song in her garden of roses. Okay, and she had complete faith in Lafayette. And if it wasn't for Lafayette, the Patriots would never have won the War of Independence. Okay, he saved the day. And that's why he is being commemorated through all United States right now through the Lafayette Trail. Okay, she says everyone will calm down. Okay, so it was like chaotic in Paris because there was all this propaganda going around. When the aristocrat shall protest, the good citizen will laugh in his face without troubling his soul and will always be stronger. So this song was to the citizens, okay, taking down the aristocrats. Small ones and great ones all have the soul of a soldier. During war, none shall be betrayed. With heart all good, French people will fight. If we see something fishy, we shall speak with courage. Lafayette says, come if you will, without fear or fire or flame. Okay, so yeah, it was really interesting that this song was to Lafayette. I was blown away when I found that out. Okay, so mea culpa is a phrase in Latin that means my fault or my mistake. Yeah, so the aristocrats are going to say it was my fault. They're going to end up having to say that. This is what they're saying. In religious use, at the site of the crucifixion of Jesus in the Gospels, the whole crowd who came together to the site, seeing had been done, beat their breast and returned. So they're saying they use this song here for the mea culpa. I confess to mighty God and to you, my brothers and sisters, that I have greatly sinned in my thoughts and in my words, in what I have done and I have failed to do, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. Therefore, I blessed Mary, ever virgin, all the angels and saints, and you, my brothers. So the fact that this all ties into, that song ties into Marie Antoinette, Lafayette, and they bring in the Virgin Mary. Okay, so it's always about the Mary. So the performers at the opening ceremony of Paris leaned into the France's epic and bloody history. mixing themes from the historical novel of Les Miserables and the heavy metal performed by the band Gojaya. Dancers played out themes of the Victor Hugo novel turned musical, appearing to move through the Parisian sewers. Their stories, their protagonistic Jean Valjean evaded police on the crime of theft. A single shot of the word liberté flashed across the screen before the beheaded Marie Antoinette appeared and launched viewers into a heavy metal performance backed by the River Seine. Okay, so yeah, it is all about liberty. Okay, this is what they're showing, that, you know, you have the three paths. You can fight, or you can kind of ride the middle path and see that both sides are just playing with you, right? Which is basically what happened in the French Revolution. They were just playing both sides against each other. And I do believe it's all to do with the British Empire doing that. Okay, so now they even showed the Frisian cap here with the girls in the audience. The Adequane, part of my book is all about that the history of Adequane and all the kings and the English kings and the French kings and how that all ends up being part of the drama. And the Templars, that part of France is very important to them. Okay, the Ile-de-France, and I don't know what the other banner is that she has on there, but look what they have in their hand. They have the Code Civil, which is the Napoleon Civil Code. Quebec is still run by that, have you know. Yeah, that's shocking. I found that out. So then, of course, all the Christians believe this was Papa Smurf because the Telegraph is a British Empire propaganda paper. And they go, oh, that's Papa Smurf. And it freaked out everybody and thought this was a satanic to the Last Supper of Christ. But it was not that, because they didn't show how many people were standing behind here on the newspaper. They just said, oh, it's 12 people. But it was way more than 12 people, and I'll show you a picture of that later. The event organizers have since spoken out to clarify that performance was not actually anything whatsoever to do with Christianity, but a homage to the ancient Greek mythology of the Olympics' ancient Greek origins. Eagle-eyed viewers may have spotted that there was actually 17 attendees behind the table of the event, not counting Dionysus. Okay, Dionysus was the Papa Smurf. Okay, those who know their Christian theology may recall the Last Supper famously only had 13 attendees, Jesus and 12 disciples, not 17. Yeah, the number 17, they're saying, was more. It was closer to 33, but they wanted you to know the number 17 because we know what letter of the alphabet that is. It's the Q, right? So the blue scrotum performer speaking out following the backlash from the Olympic viewers over the offensive set. Okay, so then they're saying here again, it's about the Dionysus, the Greek god Dionysus. So now we see there's actually, I counted 32, but I think there's probably another one to bring it to 33, or counting him would be 33. So he's eating cake. Isn't that funny, right? Because that's what did the British say? That Marie Antoinette said, go eat cake. And that's what got her beheaded, right? That the French citizens should go eat cake if they're poor. Doesn't matter. Just go eat some cake. Okay, so this was all to that, okay? And then he's sitting here. People are offensive over here because this guy has his testicles hanging out, okay? And that is also a homage to Dionysus, because Dionysus has symbolism to do with the male groin. And there's also a plague that affects the male groin, okay, tied to the Dionysus cult. Okay, so I want to get into that, and I will get into that. So Dionysus, the savior. Dionysus was born of a virgin on December 25th. The Holy Child was put in a manger among beasts. He was a traveling teacher who performed miracles. He was the god of the vine for wine and turned water to wine. Dionysus rode in a triumphal procession on an ass and donkey. He was a sacred king killed and eaten in a Eucharistic ritual. He arose from the underworld after 3 days and ascended into heaven. He was deemed father, liberator, and savior. Dionysus was considered the only begotten son, king of kings, god of gods, sin bearer, redeemer, anointed one, the alpha and the omega. He was identified with the ram or the lamb. His sacrificial titles were the Dedrites, or young man of the tree, indicates he was hung on a tree or crucified. Okay, so sounds very similar to the Jesus story, right? So we start to see that history is laid over top of previous histories and rituals. Okay? So he's also known as Bacchus, and an Egyptian equivalent is Osiris. So we know we've been following Osiris. He's the born, the king that dies and is born again. So it's pretty much the same with Dionysus. His origins are uncertain, and his cults took many forms. Some are described as in ancient sources. Here he is in various situations. He's Zeus and Persephone's child. Okay. He's part of the Eleusinian mysteries, identified him with Lacus, the son and husband of Demetrius. Most accounts say he was born in Thrace, traveled abroad, and arrived in Greece as a foreigner. His attributes are forgiveness as an arriving outsider god. Okay, his last name is Tauros, the bull. Okay, so that's where people get confused with Zeus being the bull. Yes, Zeus is the bull, but also Dionysus. Okay, so he's the son of Zeus. So the 24 alchemic symbol that they were using is Zeus, but this whole ritual to this opening ceremonies was for the son of Zeus. Now, Zeus is kind of like the god of this realm, right? He really is like brings you luck. He's your higher mind. And he's also rules the 12th house, which is your feet, which ties to your souls, your past lives, or your higher self. Okay, so he's all to do with your mind, God, and Dionysus is his son. Wine was a religious focus in the cult of Dionysus and was his earthly incarnation. Wine could ease suffering, bring joy, and inspire divine madness. Festivals of Dionysus included the performance of sacred dramas, enacting his myth, the initial driving force behind the development of theater in Western culture. That is huge. So this whole ceremony was a theatrical performance sacred to Dionysus. So it wasn't Satan, it was to Dionysus. Okay. If you want to think Dionysus is Satan, you're welcome to think that, but Satan didn't exist when Dionysus existed. Okay. That is a Christian terminology, Satan. Okay. So the cult of Dionysus is also the cult of the souls. His maenads feed the dead through blood offerings, and he acts as a divine communicator between the living and the dead. He is sometimes categorized as the dying and rising god, which is the same as Osiris. He's also the free father. He's Bacchus, the Liba Pata, of the Liberalia Festival, patron of the viniculture, wine, and male fertility. My God, I can't speak today. And the guardian of the traditions, ritual, and freedoms attached to the coming of age of the citizenship. Okay, so they're talking about that. And what else? Oh, yes. In the sense, Dionysus was the beast god within. Okay, so he's the beast within you, or your unconscious mind of modern psychology. So that's very important, right? Because he's the unconscious part. It's like he's hidden, but he's there. Okay. It also involved escape from socialized personality and ego into an aesthetic deferred state of primal herd, sometimes both. Okay, so it's basically to do with talking with the dead and the unconscious mind. And it's all part of the Eleusinian mysteries. Osirian mysteries parallel the Dionysus mysteries. Okay. Now, they also use the poppy from opium in their wine. I thought that was interesting. The poppy was also a reef. Okay. Also, honey and beeswax were often added to wine. And what else? Including the even older drink, the mead. Okay, the mead is made from honey. It's like a honey wine. But you know my theory on mead. I also believe that ties to urine. Okay, and the etymology of Uranus, who is the ruler of the Aquarian age, is urine. And I don't know if I had mentioned that before, but that was brought up in the decoder for the gematria. He said, "Oh, did you know that the etymology of Uranus is urine?" I know Orion etymology is also urine. So there's lots of urine going on too in this opening ceremony. So I'll get into that too. It's like a little crazy. But this symbol with the phalanx with the wings is also all part of the history of Dionysus. Okay, now this I find amazing. Now, if they're following Dionysus, and this is the script that we're following, this makes total sense because, as I mentioned in my last video, there'll be the city people and there'll be the rural people. Okay, so there's two festivals to Dionysus that take place on different parts of the year, but they have these two communities separate, right? Rural people and city people. So why did I put this in here? The pumps procession was completed. There was a contest of dancing and singing, and choruses would perform. Some festivals may have included dramatic performances, possibly the tragedies and comedies that had been produced at the city Dionysus or Dionysa the previous year. Okay, so they would do these dramatic performances in the city rituals. And the months after the rural festival, probably to celebrate the end of winter and the harvesting of the year's crops. According to tradition, the festival was established after the Eleutheria, a town on the border of Attica and Boeotia, had chosen to become part of Artica. Okay, so this is where they tell you about the plague. Oh yeah, this is really important. The Dionysus then punished the Athenians with a plague affecting the male genitalia, which was cured when the Athenians accepted the cult of Dionysus. Okay, so this is wild. Okay, so it also ties into the plague of the corona. And I'll get into that. I have a slide for that as well. But this, I have a feeling, is coming. The male genitalia plague. Okay? And I looked into which plague it was. And yeah, it's just wild. So I think they're really following Dionysus's cult. Okay. The last day was dedicated, this is to the festivals, was dedicated to the dead. Offerings were also offered to Hermes, who's Mercury. So we have to really keep a close eye on Mercury and where he is. Okay, and Mercury rules Virgo, which is where, you know, Washington, D.C. is all based on the spring triangle, and Virgo's in the spring triangle. Due to the connection to the underworld, Hermes is the messenger to the underworld. He was considered, it's basically your higher mind, you know. He was considered a day of merrymaking. Some poured libations on the tombs of the deceased relatives. And then they're saying here, with the ritual cry intended to order the souls of the dead to return to the underworld. Curies were also banished from the festival on the last day. I don't know what that is. To protect themselves from evil, people chewed leaves of white thorn and smeared their doors with tar to protect themselves. The festival also allowed servants and slaves to join into the festival. So it was like everybody was equal. Nobody was, higher, or there wasn't a higher social class. Everybody on these festivals, kind of same as Saturnalia. It was also the same traditions. So here, the city of Dionysia, or the Greater Dionysia, was held each year in March to honor Dionysus. And this was happening on the 6th century BC. Above all, the festivals to Dionysus allowed for the subversion of traditional social roles for many of the residents of the city. The celebration commenced the start of the sailing season. This meant that many foreigners were in the city in the time of the festivals. Even slaves and prisoners were allowed to be released for the duration of the festival. Wow, they took the prisoners out of prison for the festival. They kind of did that around Corona, right? I like to call it Corona instead of the other word. Yeah, they were allowing prisoners to leave, right? I remember people getting upset about that. That's part of the cult. Okay, so we start to see it's all part of the cult. So this is from the organizer of the Paris Olympics opening ceremony, the artistic director. He was mad because people were saying, oh, it was all anti-Christianity. But the white horse that comes through at the end there for the flag, it was not death on a pale horse. It was Sequanna, goddess of the sign, the river in which the boat procession took place. It was a representation of the Olympic spirit and of Sequanna. Paris is back on its feet, jubilant, flamboyant, creative, and open and free. Okay. So, and yes, we're going to go through all the symbolism of this. This was also in my book. I put her all in the Seine River because I knew she was super important. This is a 2,000-year-old statue of her, and the duck boat has a pomegranate in its mouth. The pomegranate is tied to Jesus. It's tied to basically ascension. Now you got to remember, Orion constellation marries pomegranate. Okay, so the Orion constellation is very important in all the story. And on the summer solstice, it ties, the sun is right on the Orion's hammer. Okay, so it's very, very important, that location in the sky. Now, this is part of the ceremony where they had Sequanna in the boat, and she brings children in her boats. That's part of her cult. But this is when they had the flame, the Olympic flame, and the children were holding it. And she's here, she's kind of in a druid, pagan, hooded. They don't have the duck on the boat, but maybe that's in there somewhere. I didn't see it, but they went down this passage, okay? And there she is rowing the boat. It's almost like a psychopomp that takes you across the river Styx. At first I thought that's what it was, but then I realized, oh no, it's Sequanna. They just don't have the duck. And the duck is very important to all this story. You basically want to be the duck, okay? So Sequanna children. First, the choice of the sign, the river in its city's heartbeat, is a mythological, a living being. So the river running through Paris is like a living being. The goddess Sequanna, the Celtic origin, but subsequently adopted by the Romans who colonized Gaul, as everyone I trust knows. If only because you once read Asterix comics. Now, the Asterix comics, I'm going to get into that. It's all part of the Gaul, because the Asterix comics strip was all different characters that lived in the Gaul. Themselves a delight of play on words and tongue-in-cheek cultural references. She is the goddess of healing and of granting of wishes. And here she is, but she's spelt with a V instead of a U. I wanted to show you that, the different spelling of it. Sequanna is a Greco-Romanized version, was the daughter of Bacchus, of Dionysus. So the daughter of Dionysus is Sequanna, basically the river sign, okay? Pursued by Neptune, Poseidon, who wanted to seduce her. Okay, so he's the goddess of the sea, right? God of the sea. So the god of the sea wanted to seduce Sequanna, and the Seine River eventually goes out to the sea. So Sequanna called upon both her father, who is Dionysus, and her old friend Circe, who is Demeter. That's Persephone's mother, whom Sequanna had helped bring her daughter, Persephone, back from the underworld. You know, the whole story about Pluto raping Persephone and putting her in the underworld, and she's only there. She ends up bargaining with him, and she ends up eating a pomegranate seed, and you know, and that causes her to have to stay in the underworld for some part of the year, and then she gets to go back to her mother and be on the surface of the planet. You know, so there's this whole mythology of the seasons with Persephone and the pomegranate as well. So following so far, this girl's talk, she caught this. Okay, this is somebody who wrote this that caught the whole opening ceremonies. Somebody figured this all out. So it was really cool that I found this because she's definitely on it. Okay, so it's not just me seeing this. There's other people seeing this. Okay, exhausted by the chase, Sequanna turned herself into the river, which took on an emerald color of her eyes. The river is the sign, which is also 775 kilometers long, and the Seine tributaries were formed by other nymphs from Sequanna's Celtic source myths. Paris is defined by this river, but its left and right banks, by its left and right banks, by its bridges, its barges, its island, the Ile de City, and the Ile de Saint Louis. Okay, everything's about Saint Louis because he's the king that ended up having all the passions of Christ. Okay, and they built a cathedral on the Ile de la Cité that's right in the middle of the Seine. They have all the passions of Christ there. That's where everything was held for many, many, many years. They're not there now, but that church was built for Saint Louis to put all the passions of Christ. There was a thorn, a crown, there was a piece of wood from the cross. Okay, so and then the Seine River also has the bateau mouche, which means flyboats. And the US team was in a boat called the bateau mouche. So they were in the flyboat. It was built in the river basin in an ever winding spiral and became part of the settlements of today. And the major institutional and historical landmarks are also all close to the river. Okay, so the rituals and traditions associated with Sequanna goddess. Okay, this is what I find hilarious. Okay, you ever had a rubber ducky? Yeah, guess who you're worshiping? Sequanna. Okay, so now we have to be watching for rubber duckies. Okay, okay, exploring the rich cultural heritage of Sequanna goddess, we dwell into the fascinating rituals and traditions that have been associated with her worship. These practices offer us insight into beliefs and ways of life in the Gallo-Roman society. So one of the symbolic rituals devoted to Sequanna involves the launching of toy boats and lit candles in the river or ponds. And that's why they put children in the boat carrying the lit torch, okay? Because it was for children. This act, often performed by children, serves as a representation of joy and wishes of good fortune. A delightful tradition cherished in France. It echoes the reverence of Sequanna as the goddess of rivers and water sources. Even before the Romans came to rule over Gaul, pilgrims came from as far as the Mediterranean and what is now the English Channel to pray to her for a cure, consult the pagan priests, stay for a short visit, give thanks. They threw ex votos or votive offerings in wood, stone, and bronze into the sacred healing pool. Over time, the Gauls and then the Romans expanded the temple complex, which is believed to have been destroyed in the 4th and 5th century. The museums has reconstructed in a color drawing what the temple looked like, including a processional walkway, a main shrine, a portico surroundings, and many springs, an oval basin containing sacred waters, terraces, gardens, and secondary buildings that could have been shops. Okay, so this is part of the springs of Sequanna. She is worshipped since perhaps 500 BC. In the 1st century BC, a healing shrine dedicated to Sequanna was established. The sanctuary was later taken over by the Romans, who built 2 temples there. All that remains of these temples are their foundations. However, 2 pottery vessels were discovered in this area. The first vessel contained 100 carved effigies of eyes, breasts, limbs, heads, and even carved internal organs. The second vessel contained 800 similar carvings. Images such as these are generally linked with healing centers, and the carving represents the afflicted area and need of the deity's attention. Likely the pilgrims attended the sacred shrine, entered a dormitory building where they would take a sacred sleep, very similar to Asclepius temples, you know, where he would make them drink milkweed and then they would fall asleep, and then they would come back to life 3 days later and decode their dreams. That's why he's called, like, brings people back from the dead, but they weren't really dead, in hopes of receiving a vision of a healer goddess. At the top of the hill would have been the main sanctuary, and this, at least in Roman times, would have contained an image of the goddess. So in 1864, the city of Paris bought the domain of Les Sources de la Seine to celebrate the river that runs through Paris. They constructed a grotto and placed the statue there. So there you go. They've been worshiping her for a while. So most of what we know of the religion of the Celtic Gauls, they're saying here, Julius Caesar firsthand account of his 9 years of war in Gaul. From that work, we are informed that the people practice animism, ascribing human characteristics to lakes, streams, mountains, and other natural features, and awarding them with quasi-defined status, such as Sequanna. Some animals were regarded as sacred, especially the boar. Their systems of gods and goddesses were loose. They were no real theology, just a set of related and involving traditions of worship. So what I find fascinating about all this is the River Seine, and I put this in my book, is actually the Milky Way. Okay, it's mind-blowing. They even have the Ile de Cygnus, where the Cygnus constellation is in the river. It's past the Eiffel Tower. It wasn't part of this ceremony, but it is very important. When you start to see the map, when you start to look at the map of Paris and how the river goes through there, it definitely is the Milky Way. But I did pictures all in my book about it and show you exactly the constellations. So I encourage you, if you want to know more, get my book. But if you have only one museum in Dijon to visit, make it the Musée Archéologique. Even passionate French art lovers do not know the story of Sequanna and the offerings that were given to her. It is a journey deep into the secret history of France. It's a secret history. Yeah, this is from the New York Times. Okay, so it's a secret, but it's not common knowledge, but they want you to know. Okay, that's why they write these articles. It's not because they're satanic or they're trying to hide it from you. They want you to know your own history and understand what's happened, and how being in one camp, like if you're in the Christian camp or you're in the pagan camp, it's all the same. It's all the same. They're just overlaying atop on each other. Okay, that's why the Notre Dame Cathedral is built on a pagan site. Okay, it's not because Christianity is evil, it's because the pagans were healers. Okay, so yeah, they did sacrifices. We still do sacrifices. We eat meat, we sacrifice animals every day, and we don't look after them very nicely either. So we're all hypocritical when you talk about all these sacrifices. You know, it's like, yeah, and we kill children every day. You know, it's like, what's going on here? You know, it's like this whole world is a sacrifice. I sometimes fantasize about making Sequanna a minor and forgotten regional goddess, world famous. They want her to be world famous, a pre-Christian healing goddess with no ties to any living religion. Yeah, we should fit nicely into the official French policy that reveres the Republican ideal. She could be the secular version of Joan the Arc, of the warrior martyr, and Our Lady of Lourdes, the miracle worker. She could become the most important female icon in France. Yep, for sure. This is in Vogue France magazine. It's safe bet that the Olympic ceremony will follow this tradition. The Olympics, in their founding legend and curative, Jolly says, alluring to the political moment, they heal the plague and they bring peace. That's the Olympics. And the significance of the sign, to begin with, the sign was a goddess, Jolly says, a nymph called Sequanna, who turned herself into the river so she could escape Neptune. So the sign is a woman who resists a violent man. And they had lots of women's statues coming up in the opening ceremonies out of the river. They were all heroic women in French history. That's a big symbol. And the one I'm going to use because it makes the river a female force of resistance. Yes, because the divine feminine has to come back. We have to remember our past and we have to start healing it. That's what this is all about. Okay. The morning Jolly and I met, the sign was full of rolling brown whirls, as if 1,000 of underwater creatures were stirring it and with their hair. Scientists are now frantically attempting to depopulate the 483-mile river in a run up to the games. After a few days of rain, the levels of E. coli are dangerously high. That's kind of bacteria. The bacteria is all part of this cult of Dionysus, and I'll show you the slides of that later too. She is young, Sequanna, with large eyes and refined features, and wears a look of anticipation. She stands at a boat, her forearms outstretched as in a gesture of welcome. The brow of her boat is the head of a duck that holds the object, a pomegranate. It has a long bill and the stern of the duck's upswept tail. I find her superb. She is our Mona Lisa, the Sequanna in the boat. Okay, they're saying here, yeah, it's just Neptune by transforming her into the Seine River. The story of Persephone we talked about. Yeah, this is all part of it. Okay, so after the kids were in the boat and she was in her druid hooded costume, she ends up getting out of the boat and then she goes on this mechanical horse. Now this to me is another timeline. Okay, so there's the healing timeline where you're healed, and then they show you what this represents. This is more AI, and because it's mechanical now, right? And then she gets off that mechanical horse and ends up mounting a real horse, a white horse. And this is why they were saying this is the pale horse of death. And she comes through with the wings, you know, it's basically like the tarot card, the death card, right? But we have two horses on two pillars here. This is probably the Gemini horses. I've done videos about the horses of Gemini. So you're coming down the middle path, right? But the rider was Florian Essert. And she is a gendarmerie non-commissioned officer of the National Gendarmerie, one of the two national law enforcement forces in France. So this I kind of found weird because it's tied to martial law. Okay, this is the Eiffel Tower, or basically the Alpha. This is the Alpha, and she came through, and then she walked on the left-hand path to deliver the flag. Okay, and they also had the last torchbearers were also in the hooded, and you know, then people say it looks like the Creed Assassin video game, but to me, this is all like Druid culture, you know, the hood, okay, the mystery person. caped rider. Right. And the Olympic flag was accidentally flown upside down in the opening ceremonies. But we saw that with Trump's attempted assassination with the flag upside down. The Patriots always flew the American flag upside down, okay, because they were kind of like anti-British Empire, right? So it's all part of it. And then the etymology of the Grande Marie is the hair of the Mare Chasseur, which is basically hunting mare, the oldest police force in France. But the etymology of this ties back to men in arms, and it was all contained with connotations of during the French Revolution. So it ties back to the French Revolution. They're bringing that in. And then this word ends up the etymology being the office of the marshal. So it's kind of like martial law. And at the time, one would refer indistinguishably either to the archer of the Mare Chassé. So it's like they have a bow and arrow too. But I think it's kind of relating to martial law with the AI. That's what I think, that part of it. Or they, they have to kind of tell you both paths all the time. So the pack boat, which is where all the French Olympians were on. This is like a messenger boat. And I see this kind of like as Mercury, as the messenger boat. This is known as the mail boat. It's a postal marking or cancellation stamped on mail posted at sea or in the harbor for processing by the postal authorities at the next port of call. Okay, so the mail so marked in one country will often carry the stamps of another country relating to the mail posted at sea. I see it kind of like the messenger. It's like it's the messenger. It's mail, right? So that was interesting. And this is from the decoders for gematria. This was a slide that he had put in here talking about Uranus, the god of heaven, but he also rules mist, rain, and sky. And he'd done a whole decode to Prince with the purple rain because it was raining there. And you could go listen to his video. I'll post it in the description box if you want to just learn the gematria decode of all this. But they missed a lot. They didn't understand the Dionysus and all that. So that's fine. But there's some good stuff too, because he's saying he's helping people understand that this is all tying to Greek gods. And the mist, and this is what I found interesting. This is how I found this out, was from his video. So there's some good stuff in his video. The sky flame for the cauldron of lighting the torch was made of mist and light. It was made of electricity. It wasn't even fire. Okay, and this is because Uranus rules electricity and computers. It's basically AI, but there's also the other part where he kind of allows you to be free, right? Uranus is the rebel. He doesn't like society. He wants to be away from society. So we see the two kind of paths there with Uranus. It's the age of Aquarius, basically. So this is what the cauldron looked like before it was lit. Now, the commentator on the news was saying it was like a balloon, a helium balloon, because the very first helium balloon was launched off in Paris. Right? They actually did it with wool, sheep wool, and hay. And that's how they got it to lift off. That was the very first lift off into, plane, the beginning of flying, right? Was all happening in France. And I'll go into the history of that because there's some really good stuff in that. And this is when it was a light. And then you see the water is there too. It's all symbolic. And this is an overhead view of it. So it was in a cross, right? It looks like a Celtic cross. So this is the very first balloon, and they actually had a constellation named after it. It's kind of close to the Golden Gate. It was below Sagittarius originally, but it's no longer there. And it was painted blue and red and gold, and it had the zodiac all around it, the whole zodiac wheel. And the names of the inventors were Montgolfier brothers, Joseph and Michael. They invented the style hot air balloon. They also invented a hydraulic ram pump, which is the symbol of Dionysus as well. It's also the symbol of Jesus, the ram, the lamb, right? So that I find really bizarre, you know? So it's almost like the tooth pass. Then they got into collaboration with a wallpaper manufacturer, Jean-Baptiste Revillon, and it was him that made the balloon. And there it is. This is it. This is the original September 11th, 9/11. It has to do with flight. Okay. It has to do with flight. So, of course, September 11th was to do with planes and taking down the two pillars, right? Um, yeah, this is like crazy. It's all a ritual. So the next test was on September 11th from the grounds of Foley Titan, close to Revillon's house. There was one concern about the effects of the flight into the upper atmosphere on living creatures. They didn't know if people would, get sick if they went up into the sky. So the king proposed to launch two convicted criminals, but it was most likely that the inventors decided to send a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. And then they did another test flight on the 19th of September. Okay, so then we have 199, right? So always the 1 and the 9, right? Because what does 1 and 9? It ends up equaling to 10, the 1 and the 0, right? The binary code. The sheep's name was Mount OCL, which basically means climb to the sky. A duck and a rooster was with him. Excuse me. And the sheep was believed to have a reasonable approximation of human physiology. Now they're talking about the duck was expected to be unharmed by being lifted and was included as a control for effects created by an aircraft rather than the altitude. The rooster was included as a further control as it was a bird that did not fly high altitudes. And the demonstration happened at the Royal Palace at Place de Versailles. Now here it's showing that the brothers were Freemasons of Les Neuf Sœurs, which is the Nine Sisters Lodge in Paris. So that's why they were using the balloon cauldron. Now, Réveillon, I didn't realize this, is a long dinner held in the evening preceding Christmas Day and New Year's Eve. So I guess that's why they used the long table with the Dionysus blue character. And it's observed in Canada, in Quebec, Manitoba, Ontario, and Alberta, New Brunswick. And you can see the meaning is to awaken. So that's very relevant. That's what they're trying to do. Since the animals survived, the king allowed flights with humans. Again, in collaboration with Revillon, Etienne built a 60,000 cubic foot balloon for the purchase of making flights with humans. Then they talk about the zodiac in here. I believe, yeah, it had fleur-de-lis, which is really important. Signs of the zodiac and the sons of Louis XVI's face in the center, interlaced with the royal monogram in the center section. So that was Marie Antoinette's husband. So this was all around the time of Marie Antoinette when this and the French Revolution starting. Okay, so they started to have flight then. It was actually 10 years before. So he eventually they went with humans in it. This is one of the monuments for it. the trumpet angels up there, and they were going to the heavens, right? That's what they believed. So so here Rosier got involved, and he was a French chemist and physics teacher and one of the first pioneers of aviation. But yeah, it crashed and he died. And this was on November 21st, 1783, across the English Channel. So here's a comic strip of them in memory of them. And here's that same cauldron, that they did the Olympic ceremony to. It was all to do with this balloon and the death of them, right? So yeah, anyhow, they ended up doing the first flight at Titan de Telet property. Had the privilege of receiving the celebrities of his time. This is all tied into the French Parnassus. It's basically the mountain that Dionysus lives on. And all of the nine muses are there with Apollo and the Graces. And that is kind of like, it's all again tied to Dionysus. Okay? They're not talking about Dionysus being part of the mountain here, but if you go look into the history, it definitely is. And then they had Apollo playing the lyre. They made a monument to Paranus, and they've created this big giant building in Paris named Parnassus, which is basically the mount where the nine muses and Dionysus live and Apollo lives and they play the lyre. So the Parnassus is mentioned in early ancient Greek literature. Many of its ancient communities are cited in Homer's Iliad. From a linguistic point of view, it was the home to states of the Dorians. And here we go. The mountain was sacred to Dionysus and the Dionysus mysteries. It is also sacred to Apollo and the muses. So yeah, it's very important. Now, then we get Lady Gaga. Okay, Lady Gaga comes in. She pre-records this. It wasn't part of the actual opening ceremonies. And she does this kind of French cabaret song with all the feather pom-poms and on Golden Staircase. And it's actually right outside the Notre Dame Cathedral. Now, the Notre Dame Cathedral is where the Templars, the main Templar guy got assassinated and burnt at the stake, right? When they started burning all the Templars. And it was an original pagan site. And then they built the Notre Dame Church on top of it. And then, of course, it burnt recently in 2019. That's also symbolic of the burning there. And yeah, so the Notre Dame Cathedral is where she sang. So I believe Lady Gaga performance was part of the ascension symbolism, right? Because it's the feather. It's the duck. Okay, so they put up in the air balloon the duck, who is Sequanna, right? And the reason that the duck was important was because the duck could fly but also be on water and also on land. So they figured the duck it would not get harmed. The rooster couldn't fly, and he's the Gaelic symbolism of fighting, right? When the rooster has its arm up in front, that's called the Gaelic rooster. It's basically you're gonna fight. And then the sheep just follows and ends up going to heaven, basically dies. Okay, those are the three paths. You're gonna be a sheep, you're gonna be a rooster, and you're gonna fight and be really angry, or you're gonna be the duck and you're just gonna let it go off your back. The water goes off the duck's back, nothing bothers the duck. Okay, so that's why she did it down by the river with the ascended stairs up to the Notre Dame Cathedral where the rose window is. Okay, that's the ascension path. And here it is here, the gold stairs. and she actually spoke about it. Yeah, this was one of her texts. Um, I feel so completely grateful to have been asked to open at the Paris Olympics. I am so humbled to be asked by the organizers. The song is sung by Zizi Jean Mier, born in Paris, a French ballerina. She famously sang Mon truc en plume in 1961. The title means My Things with Feathers. And this is not the first time we've crossed paths. Zizi starred in Cole Porter's musical Anything Goes, which was my first jazz release when she did with Tony Bennett. Um, and then she says, we rented the pom-poms from Le Lido Archive, a real French cabaret theater. We collaborated with Dior to create custom costumes using naturally molted feathers. So they're basically duck feathers. I studied French choreography and put a modern twist on the French classic. I researched tirelessly to study a joyful French dance, brushing up on some old skills. I bet you didn't know I used to dance at a 60s French party on the Lower East Side when I was first starting out. That's from Lady Gaga. Okay, and then there's talking here that she was supposed to sing with Celine Dion, and they were going to sing La Vie en Rose, which is the life of the rose, which is basically Ascension. But then they separated them. Okay, and I do believe Dion picks for Dionysus. Okay, and because because she has a stiff body disease, because in mythology, when you're not awakened, you're like a statue. You're not just a sheep, you're a statue. Like you're frozen, you're in stone, you're not getting it, okay? So that's the symbolism of the unascended path. And she's a stiff person. So I just find that like bizarro. But yeah, this whole world is bizarro. So there she's singing on top of the Eiffel Tower. If you saw her, she was like suspended up in the Eiffel Tower, which represents freedom. It was, well, it all depends. It was represents the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution. Now, if you want to think the Eiffel Tower is representing freedom, it's kind of twisted, right? Because um, cutting off Marie Antoinette's head and King Louis XVI's head, and then they do a celebration of the Eiffel Tower for that event is kind of gruesome when you think about it. So Celine Dion returned to the world stage in the Olympic Games opening ceremony in Paris in her first public performance since revealing she was diagnosed with stiff person syndrome. And then she did the song Hymn L'Amour, originally performed by Edith Piaf. Okay. And the lyrics of the hymn of love, basically, that's what it means. And this is why I was kind of blown away by this, okay? The blue sky over us can collapse on itself, and the ground can really cave in. Little matters to me if you love me. I couldn't care less about the whole world as long as love will flood my mornings, as long as my body will tremble under your hands. The problem make little difference to me, my love, because you love me. Now, there's reference to the moon, which is the balloon kind of looked like a moon, right? I will go take down the moon. Okay, I will go to the end of the world. I will dye my hair blonde. If you ask me to, I will go take down the moon. I will steal fortune if you ask me to. So basically, it's all to devotion of one's love, right? We we will have for us eternity in the blue of all immensity in heaven. No more problems, my love. You believe that we love each other, God? Reunite those who love each other. So basically, he's saying, it's kind of like saying, if one day life tears you away from me, if you die, then you will be far from me. What's it matter if you love me? Because I will die too. So basically, you'll die for love, right? And you want to be reunited with the people that have died before you. But the moon path, the moon path is, yes, memory. It belongs to the house of home and family and all your loved ones. That's what Cancer is ruled by the moon. That's the fourth house. It's your family house. It's your ancestral memory. Does your mind get wiped on the moon? Maybe. I don't know. But the symbolism kind of proves that. But it's like a reset for you, right? You get to go back and you get to reset, and you don't really ascend. You don't get a break from this reloop. That's kind of the path that I see here. So La Vie, La Rose wasn't sung, which would have been ascension, representing the Virgin Mary, the rose, and your DNA. But this is more about the blue sky collapsing over us. And it's so freaky. The comic strip Asterisk, their last well, not their last, but one of their last, and then they did a few after, was the 33rd episode, and it was called The Sky's Falling. Okay, and also in the 17th letter post, they had a post called Skyfall. And then Adele did the song Skyfall with, 007 movies, James Bond. Okay, so this is the asterisk, the falling sky. Okay, and this is all about Gaul. This is all about the Celtics, mythology, this whole comic strip. And guess what the plot was? This is like really crazy. It's about an alien's ships. So the sky falls on our head, the 33rd volume of Asterisk comic book series. Okay, the book was intended as a tribute to Walt Disney, as a satire on the state of the French comic industry. It was released on October 14, 2005. So the alien spaceships appear above the Gaulish village, causing nearly all the people and animals to turn rigid. I told you, stiff person syndrome, okay? That's that path. Only asterisks, obliques, which is the obliques, is when the sun is around October 14th, where they said this was released. The sun is on the obliques, the Spica star in the Virgin Mary Virgo's hand. Okay, that's all. Washington, D.C. was all built around that spring triangle. I've showed you guys this millions of times. And yeah, the obelisk is very important. Get a fix and dog matrix, because there's a dog, a Snoop Dogg, okay? And there's a dog because dog is God, and unaffected due to the consumption of a magic potion. Now, what's that magic potion? It's ambrosia, right? What do I believe it is? Oh, it's the etymology of Uranus. Yeah, urine. Oh, it's the etymology of Orion. Oh, yeah, urine. Okay. And urine marries pomegranate. Orion marries pomegranate. So that's just crazy. An alien named Toon emerges from the spherical spaceship. He is from the planet Tadzilwini and is accompanied by a super clone security man. Toon turns off his ship's anti-collision magnetic field, ending the paralysis of the village. So eventually they become unparalyzed. He informs the Gauls he is on a mission to confiscate their secret weapon, the get-a-fix potion. I told you urine is the secret weapon. You wouldn't believe it. I was talking to a client, and her daughter had actually healed her vision by using aged urine. And aged urine doesn't have any smell hardly. It's bizarre. It evaporates all the odors if you keep it for a year or so. That is known throughout the universe, the potion, right? In order to prevent it from being seized by evil aliens called the Nagmas. Okay, so there you go. Can you believe it? It's getting kind of weird. Okay, so asterisk means in Greek, the little star, right? It's your asterisk on your computer board there. During the campaign for Paris to host the 1992 Summer Olympics in 1986, asterisk appeared in many posters over the Eiffel Tower. Later, it was lost to Barcelona, and the 2024 Summer Olympics held 32 years later in the same city after Tokyo in 2021. Okay, so it's kind of bizarre. And The Royal Canadian Navy has a supply vessel named MV Asterix. Yeah, it's pretty funny. This is the comic strip. There's lots of characters, lots of different religions. So very open-minded, open community, right? And yeah, I want to show you the 33rd show was The Falling Sky, but then afterwards they have another 7 episodes, Astric and the White Iris. It's like the fleur-de-lis, the iris, okay? That is basically the Virgin Mary, okay? They also have a show called How Obelisk. You want to be the obelisk because that's the phoenix nest, right? An obelisk originally was a short, squat obelisk, and it was known as the phoenix nest, the bird, right? The Lady Gaga bird, the feathers that you ascend, right? The obelisk fell into a magic potion when he was a little boy. So he became very strong and he had superpowers. And then they have the 12 tasks of Asterix, which is like Hercules' 12 tasks, which is basically the Orion constellation, right? And he conquers Rome as well. Okay. So yeah, it's crazy. Now, this is when it gets really crazy. So I went in to look at the Asterix and the Falling Sky episode. And you guys know that I did a video on Mickey Mouse and what that really means. And the Mickey Bliss means take the piss out of you. Okay. Now, back in the day, the pirates would come and, you could sell your piss to the pirates and they would give you money for it, but you have to have a pot to piss in. So the phrase, I'm so poor, I don't have a pot to piss in, is all to do with you're not able to sell your piss. So I'm sorry, pee, piss, whatever. It's obviously has a huge history, okay? And that's basically when you look at Mickey Mouse, it's basically a tease to take the Mickey out of you. Yeah, they're laughing at you. They're laughing at you because it's all a big joke. Okay. Then they have here the super clone, a caricature of Superman. Interesting in this case of Superman, his super abilities come from Earth's gravity being weaker than that of Krypton. Okay, so Earth's gravity is no longer strong. The face of the caricature is Arnold Schwarzenegger, known in his action films. We clone him as either a spider or a bat super clone is also referenced. You able to do me little favors was this is also a phrase. So anyhow, yeah, I thought that was crazy when I saw that again, to take the Mickey out of you. So they know. Then of course the Minions showed up at the Paris Olympics with a little video, and the song playing was the Chariots of Fire. They're on a submarine. There's a bullseye that they've painted on the submarine. Then arrows go through and cause it to get filled with water. Now, the whole thing about the minions, and they follow this villain, Gru. Okay, the guy that invented them said, on occasion, I was watching a documentary about the new underwater costumes for the UK. And that gave me a brilliant idea. However, something that didn't quite convince me, as it had to look like something more pleasant than terrifying. So I thought of pills with glasses. So the minions are basically supposed to be pills with glasses. It's a pill needed to be taken for something. Okay. But originally, yeah, they were diving, but check this out. According to YouTube channel Universal, one of the main theories about the origins of the minions was the medical experimentation during World War II. Some of these horrid procedures included injections on children to change their color. Prisoners of all, maybe it was to change the color of their eyes. Yeah. Prisoners of all ages at the camps were used as guinea pigs in terrible experiments in search of the pure race. Then, during the heyday, the minions, a photograph began to circulate in which some people could be seen wearing uniforms that look very similar to the yellow characters of the minions, immediately began the rumor that they were Jewish children who had been kidnapped by Germans to perform forced labor. So it's pretty crazy. It's very dark history to these little guys, but they're supposed to be pills now. So yeah, so then they shoot into these bull eyes, and the submarine starts to get filled with water. Then at the end, Mona Lisa drifts up from the bottom of the Seine River. So is that Sequanna? They're saying that she's our Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa ties all into the city of Florence, the very first republic. Okay. And that's all in my book too. All to do with the Medicis. It's a very important part of all this, the very first republic. To free themselves from the Pope, because the Pope was ruling over the city. Yeah, that's the phalanx, the bull symbol, because I wanted to remind you of that, because at the end of this little video of the Pickable Me 3, the minions in the jail scene show they love bananas, but he has the wings. So this is probably the phallic symbol again, tied to Dionysus. And then they have the creator of the minions, is his last name is Coffin, but they do this often. The coffin comes and it's full of bananas. So what does that mean? Are these all phalluxes? And then the plague is coming, the Dionysus plague that is tied to the male genitals? Maybe so. I don't know, but that's all part of the story, right? And I found the disease. The historians had long tried to identify the disease behind the plague of Athens. The disease had traditionally been considered an outbreak of bubonic plague in its many forms. But reconsideration of the reported symptoms and ended up being that it could be what's it, typhus or smallpox, measles, or toxic shock syndrome, or Ebola. Okay. But I have a feeling it is the bubonic plague because, it affects the genitals, the male genitals. That's what they're saying. Then I found this was somebody kind of making a slapstick thing about, what are the minions made of? I'd like to take a moment to say that they can't all be male if they have no two distinctive reproduction organ sets. So basically, they have no gender. They're going to be accumulating a lot of mutations. Their DNA is going to be damaged, and they'll have to do some way to repair it. It seems as if a clue to everlasting life is right in front of us. So maybe there's going to be yellow pills to repair people's DNA. I don't know. It seems kind of crazy. They're saying here the minions actually are a complex multicellular organism with a fierce need for a fierce master. It's all slapstick, but it's kind of bizarro. And here's this nasty disease of the bubonic plague, Yersinia pestis. It's a bacteria, okay? On 1 to 7 days after exposure to the bacteria, flu-like symptoms develop. The symptoms include fever, headaches, and vomiting, as well as swollen and painful lymph nodes occurring in the area closest to the bacteria entered the skin. Yeah, so they create these, and then they may break open. Nasty. It says this in the Bible, that people will have sores on them if they've taken the mark of the beast, right? The bubonic plague is mainly spread by infected fleas from small animals. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm having problems with fleas. I have to deflea my dog every day. I have a flea collar on. I got fleas, like not going crazy in my house because I'm on top of it, but it's like, I'm like, whoa, how come there's so many fleas this year? I don't know if you guys, maybe it's just the heat up here in Canada. I don't know. It may also result from exposure to body fluids from a dead, plagued, infected animal. Mammals such as rabbits, hares, and some cat species are susceptible to bubonic plague and typically die upon contraction. So the bubonic form of the plague, the bacteria enters through the skin through a flea bite and travel via a lymphatic vessel or lymph node, causing it to swell. So, and then they're saying here, while vaccines against the plague have been developed, the World Health Organization recommends only high-risk groups, such as certain laboratory personnel and healthcare workers, get inoculated. Well, that'll probably change if this is the timeline. And then I noticed that another one of this jail scene, they're all in jail because basically they've lost their guru leader, so they end up getting put in jail. And when they're in jail, they knock this red ball into the jail guards' genitals. Okay, so I think this is something going on there. So who created the Minions? The section of the opening ceremony featuring the Paris-based animation studio Illumination Minions character nods to French writer Jules Verne, 1970 adventure novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and began with the visual references to actors and filmmakers George Méliès' influential 1902 short film A Trip to the Moon. Now, I've done a video on this before. This guy, it's the face of the moon, you know, the face of the moon with it's like it's all a worship to Neptune. He does these, you know, animated movies, silent movies. You have to go check them out because a lot of this stuff is based on his work. Now, this is what's crazy. This is a little personal story. I was in Walt Disney and I was with a group of friends and I went into the 20 Leagues Under the Sea um, submarine. And I don't really like being underwater for long periods of time. I have a fear of drowning, slightly, you know, not really bad, but I guess I have a slight fear of being underwater and not being able to get out. My brother used to torment me and hold me under the water. It probably comes from that. But what's really bizarre is when I was in this 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, they turned it now into a Nemo ride, like the cartoon Nemo. Okay, so I'm in there and I'm in this little vessel with people. We're all close together, and we're going around, and we're supposed to be under the water, which we are, but you know. And then we're looking at an aquarium, and Nemo shows up. Okay, the little character fish, and I see it, and I instantly turn green and pass out. And I could never figure out why. Okay. I was always like, why when I saw Nemo did I pass out? Like I had no, I don't even think I even watched the movie. Okay. But so it's always stuck because I always pay attention to my instinctual physics of my body, you know? So anyhow, so when I was researching all this about the minions, guess what? Their submarine is Nemo. Okay. And they showed up in the Seine River in a submarine. It was like a, you know, pre-recorded video, but you know, what's the chances of that? You know, it's the magic fly, yellow submarine. Well, the French people were in the fly boat. Okay, so it's just, I don't know, just, and then there was this bacteria, these E. coli that was in the river, right? So then it starts to get layered because it ties into this asterisk cartoon. So there's one of the wives of unhygienics name was bacteria. And it's they're saying here they had two sons. One was blonde and the other had red hair, and that was in the show Asterix the Secret Weapon. Well, the red hair is Celtic, right? And then her name is the original French language version of the stories of the Yellow Submarine, which is pronounced the same as Yellow Submarine, being taken from the song of the name by the Beatles. And I've always been suspicious about that Yellow Submarine song, that it's a precursor to something, okay? And now I'm starting to realize what it is. It's this bacterial plague that gets into your skin and causes genital plague, which is all part of the cult of Dionysus. So it's most likely that's what's going to happen. Okay, so then it's always fun to go watch these, famous quotes that people put on, and then the news picks them up. So when the news picks up people's, little text post, it's for a reason, okay? They're saying, oh, the minions, he's floating through a stop motion space screen. Little petite prince spotted and an abandoned Statue of Liberty. Okay, so now they're saying, the Statue of Liberty is abandoned. It cuts to the minions in a submarine. Okay, so what's that about? Okay, why are there minions there? People are saying, why are the minions at the opening ceremonies? Things I did not expect from Google today. They show a little, oh, that was funny. I forgot to put that in, but there's like a duck. There's a duck and some rabbits and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I had the duck path again. The City of Dionysus festival commences with a ritual procession of the wooden effigy of Dionysus called the X-O-Anon. I think I'd mentioned this a few years back, the Anons, right? With the 17th letter movement, X-O-Anons. This was carried through the city streets to the god's temple. The participants of the procession followed the effigy carrying phalanxes. Meanwhile, a trailing troupe of actors reenacted the fabled arrival of Dionysus in Athens. Once at a temple of Dionysus, festival participants took part in ritual sacrifices and singing of hymns, which Celine Dion sang a hymn, okay, to the god. At the temple precinct, a bull was led in by another ritual procession to be sacrificed to the god. Thereafter, the effigies of Dionysus was carried back to the theater of Dionysus in a torch lighting procession into the city. This procession, or catagogia, signified the official beginning of the city of Dionysus. Yeah. Okay, so this was a complete ritual to Dionysus. And then the primitive wood image, so unlike marble sculpture, that it was supposed to have fallen from the heavens and was deeply revered. Okay, so this effigy is falling from the heavens. Okay, so check this out. The closing ceremonies is somebody falling from the heavens, suspended in time, with conscience and with the idea of together we make a difference. Okay, suspended in time over the world. There's this movie called The Fountain, and it's all to do with the tree with Hugh Jackman. And the official trailer here, this person is kind of being suspended in time to the tree of life. Now, the closing ceremonies are on August 11th, and Dionysus is right in the location where the sun is on the summer solstice, on the hammer of Orion. And I have to do another video all about this location in the sky. I found out that it means the light of heaven. And that's super important. And I will do a video about this because this is all happening in the Lion's Gate, right? That when the sun is between Cancer and Leo, this is when it's called the Lion's Gate. And 8 times 11 is 88. And the gematria people are starting to see a lot of 88s and 888s. So I do think there's symbology there going on. But Dionysus, we have to keep an eye on him now, this asteroid, because this is what's being worshipped. It's not Osiris. Okay, so they're saying here about the whole Olympic days. There was 17 days again. So the letter Q. And he's saying on August 11, 2025, a new page will be turned with the closing ceremony and Olympic Games. It will be the time to say goodbye to all the Olympic athletes and delegations who have thrilled us, made us dream, and brought us to tears during 17 days of amazing, intense competition. So yeah, this is the closing games, and I'll do a video on that and the Lions Gate. But yeah, I'm just blown away by the 3 paths. And I don't know if I passed over the slide that talked about why they picked the duck, the rooster, and the sheep, but they did explain why, because the duck could fly and the rooster couldn't, and the sheep had the physiology of a human, so I guess that's why they call us sheep. But anyhow, it was pretty wild for me. I learned a lot from the opening ceremonies. I hope you guys did too from all this. It was a lot to put together, but because it really tied into my prediction of what these opening ceremonies were going to be about, and about the French Revolution, and Lafayette was tied in there, and the Virgin Mary. I think Celine Dion has Mary in the middle of her name. One of the torchbearers had Mary in it, the last torchbearer. So they tied that into, and then of course the song of the heavy metal band there. So yeah, it's all there, but you have to dig, right? You have to really dig to find it now. But once you understand which cult they're worshiping, we have, it's a clear run now. So you guys need to just keep understanding the symbols of all the Dionysus cult, and then keep your eyes peeled and send me stuff if you see anything else. And I know there was a lot more going on at the opening ceremonies, but this video is long enough, and I think we got to the main point, was that yeah, there's probably another plague coming, and it's probably bacterial, I'm assuming, but it doesn't mean that you won't be fine, okay? Because if you're in bliss, your immune system will be strong. If your DNA is intact, you'll be even better off. So it's all good, so just stay in bliss. Don't freak out about this. It's almost entertaining for me. I have to find it funny, it's like, this is getting crazy. Yeah, so take a look and see if you want to get my book, because there's a lot more information in there that I can't even touch on, because it's like 300 and some odd pages. But obviously it's all part to this story of the Templars, and yeah, it's all to do with Christianity, but it's also to do with the pagan gods too, because they're all part of knowing the path of how to ascend from this realm. So be the duck, be the rubber ducky, man. Be the rubber ducky and just laugh. Be Bert in Sesame Street and just laugh with it, because it's, and drink pomegranate juice. I do all the time. So take care, and bliss to you all. Bye.